This is Sean Stevenson from the SeanStevensonModel.com, and you're listening to Justin and Kate at Extreme Health Radio, bringing cutting-edge fitness and nutrition information right into your eardrums. So buckle your seatbelts and listen in.
Welcome to Extreme Health Radio. Extreme Health Radio.
Where natural solutions to almost every health condition are out there. Join us on our journey to find them.
Now here are your hosts,
Broadcasting from sunny Southern California around the world,
Justin and Kate Stellman.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us here on another episode of ExtremeHealthRadio.com. This is episode number 138, so you can check out the show page at ExtremeHealthRadio.com/138. And my name is Justin, and I'm here with my wife,
Kate, on this glorious summer day.
Kate, yeah, and we are broadcasting worldwide from Southern California, and we do shows 4 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So if you'd like to join our show and join our community and follow what we have going on, we'd love to have you a part of our community, learn about natural health and alternative cures for things. You can go to extremehealthradio.com/Facebook and click the like button on there and join our community, stay up to date with what we're doing. And for reference, today the... Thursday, August 12th.
Yeah.
2000.
Not Thursday, Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
August 12th.
I need some coconut oil.
You do need some coconut oil. You need to wake up there.
Monday, August 12th, 2013. And if you would like to join the show, you can do so a few different ways. You can go to, actually just email me, Justin at extremehealthradio.com.
Or Kate, Kate, at extremehealthradio.com.
You've got your juice there. I like that.
Got my big old juice, and I'm taking notes for everybody.
Fresh vegetable juice.
Mm-hmm. Way to start the morning.
Thanks for taking notes.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
And if you like, you can also send a voicemail in to any of our guests. You can go to extremehealthradio.com/voicemail, all one word. Record a message right from your computer. We'll play it on the air so everyone can hear it. And also, I want to let you know, too, if you have any comments about this show, episode 138, you can just comment it at the very bottom of this show page. And you'll be able to check that out and leave your comment there. And I also wanted to let you know, too, that if you'd like to support our show, and a lot of people do this, and we appreciate everyone who purchases from Amazon through our link. We get about 5% commission, small commission, but it really does keep the shows free for everyone. So if you go to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon, every time you make a purchase, that will greatly, greatly help our cause. And we have a great show with Dr. Mary Newport, and we're going to be introducing her in just a second. But just looking at our upcoming show schedule, quite an eclectic upcoming.
We do have an eclectic week coming up, or next couple weeks, actually.
We have a motley crew coming up. We have Sheila Hemphill, and she'll be talking about the dangers of smart meters. Mm-hmm. Very interesting topic. She was on, I think, the Alex Jones show and all kinds, been all over the internet. And then we have Dr. Brian Peskin. He's going to be talking about cardiovascular health and the dangers of fish oil. Mm-hmm. So if you're taking fish oils, like your doctor tells you, not telling you not to go against your doctor, but
you might want to look into it.
You might want to listen to that show. And then we've got Dr. Betty Martini, and she'll be talking about the dangers of aspartame. And that is really, really nasty stuff. And but today we have Dr. Mary Newport, and I'm really excited about having her on because this is the first time we've really talked about this particular subject. And she is a neonatologist in Florida, and she's been working with MCT oil. And I just read on the internet that 15 million people are going to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's by the year 2050.
15 million?
2050. And I came across this quote too. Dr. Theodore Van Italy of Harvard and Columbia University says, "My view of ketone ester story is that if the results in human subjects bear out the findings in laboratory animals, they could well be the major advance in nutrition in the 21st century." So we've got Dr. Mary Newport, who has had some incredible success with ketones with her husband, who had Alzheimer's disease. And so I want to thank you, Mary, for being on the show.
Good morning. How are you doing? Because it's afternoon. No, it's afternoon here, morning there.
I know. I think we all need to take our coconut oil.
I think we do. I love it.
No, it's going great. And so you guys are in Florida, I think we discussed before the show?
Right. Yeah, near Tampa, Florida.
And you have a practice there as well because you help the preemie babies, don't you?
Right. I work in newborn intensive care units and take care of sick and premature newborns. Oh. And I've been doing that for about 30 years now.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. And so what are some of the things that you're seeing with the premature babies? Are there a lot of health issues or more health issues that are coming out these days?
Well, the infant mortality has come down quite a bit. One of the problems we've seen on the rise in the last few years, 5 or 6 years, is babies that are born of mothers who have been addicted to painkillers.
Oh,
wow.
That's a really big problem these days, especially in Florida. There are a few other states, where things have really gotten out of control. So we're seeing a lot of that. And it was about a third of our admissions last year to our newborn ICU.
Oh, my gosh. And so what are some of the symptoms that the babies have if the mom is addicted to painkillers?
Yeah, so once they're delivered, they're no longer getting, methadone or oxycodone or whatever it is the mother's been taking, and they'll start having tremors and fever and vomiting and diarrhea, and the symptoms that an adult would have if they were withdrawing.
Okay.
And they're often very rigid, very stiff. Babies tend to be kind of limp, but these babies are very stiff. And excessive crying, very poor sleep, so it's a really disturbing problem. And, we end up, the average length of stay in the hospital for these babies is about 3 weeks, and some as long as 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. And we basically have to treat them with an opiate, usually morphine, and then slowly wean them off of it.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's a very sad problem.
Wow. That's sad. And so have you started using any of the coconut oil in your practice? Can you do that?
I wish I could do that. That's a project I'd like to get started. But in reality, babies, if they're breastfed, they're getting the medium-chain triglycerides already that are in coconut oil.
Uh-huh.
And the formula companies have all of their formulas contain coconut oil and or palm kernel oil and medium-chain triglyceride oil. So it's already in the infant formulas, and that's been true since about the 1980s or so.
Okay, well, at least that's a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah. Back in when I was doing my training, which was from 78 to 83, we were using MCT oil, which is extracted from coconut oil. We were adding it directly to the infant formulas with our tiny preemies to help them grow faster. They absorbed it very well, and they grew faster if we did this. And then the formula manufacturers started adding it to the infant formulas. They just add more to the premature baby formulas to increase how much calories per ounce they're getting, and they grow faster that way.
Wow,
so it's been around for decades.
Oh, that's really good. And so your story with coconut oil started, how many years ago did that start?
A little over 5 years ago.
Okay.
Oh, and so pretty recent.
Yeah, started with your husband having some issues, right?
Right. Yeah, he was an accountant, and he worked at home for my practice and took care of our children from the time they were babies. He stayed home with them, and it just worked out very well for us because my job is such that I have these very sudden emergencies. I have to drop everything and run to a delivery room problem, for example. And we were married for 10 years before we had our children, and he was really concerned about, how many hours I'd be away. And we just decided, he volunteered to stay home with them, and we decided that would be great for our families. That's what he did. And as an accountant, he was able to work from home. It just worked out beautifully, for our family. So everything went along swimmingly well until he was about age 51. So this was around 2001.
Okay.
And he started making payroll mistakes that just didn't make sense. I mean, like several thousand extra dollars, that kind of thing.
Oh, gosh.
And I thought, well, maybe our practice has gotten more complicated, so I'd sit down with him to do the payroll. And then he started procrastinating on tax returns. and missing deadlines for like quarterly reports and things like that. And I thought he was just like losing interest or, midlife crisis kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But then he started having problems remembering if he'd been to the bank and the post office on a given day, and he would misplace the mail, so I had no way of knowing. I mean, he would be out in his garage somewhere buried or in the back of his truck or somewhere, and I really had no way of knowing whether he'd been there or not, and he couldn't remember. And I thought, that's really strange, because I'm just 2 years younger than him, and I couldn't imagine that I would forget if I had been there, in a given day. And he was also depressed at that point, and he saw a physician, a psychiatrist, and we actually talked about dementia, but he felt that his memory issues were more likely related to depression and started him on an antidepressant, which that's what psychiatrists do. But then I had an opportunity to open a new newborn intensive care unit about an hour north of where we lived, and we moved away, and it became much more obvious after we moved how much problem he was having, because he could not learn the streets. And it's a very small town, Spring Hill, several north, south, east, west arteries, and he was completely confused about where he was and whether he was heading north or south, and it just didn't clear up. I mean, I caught on pretty quickly, but he just didn't, and that had never been a problem for him before. And then he started spending endless hours in the garage looking for something, and he would look all day long, 6 or 8 hours, for something, and he couldn't remember what it was that he was looking for, but he was still looking for it when I'd get home from work, for example, from the hospital. And it was just strange behavior, and his accounting skills seemed to be declining, even though he was on a computer every day, hours. It was that whole use it or lose it thing. He was using it every day, and he still lost it. It just slowly eroded, and so I called our local Alzheimer family organization, and they recommended a neurologist, and so we went to see him, and he did a test called the mini mental status exam. That was the first thing that he did, and it's a 30-point test, and if you're normal, it's a fairly easy test. You'll get 30 points, and he only got 23 points, and it was a bit startling. There's a picture that you have to draw, and his picture looked nothing like, it's like two intersecting pentagons. Which sounds a little bit hard, but you should be able to visualize it and at least do something like that. He had lines going to nowhere, and it was just a bizarre-looking picture. And I thought, is that what he's really seeing?
Yeah.
So I was really fairly shocked, and he was too. He was fully aware that he was having problems. Not everybody with Alzheimer's is, but he was, and so he had a whole battery of tests: an EEG, MRI, blood work to rule out things like B12 and vitamin D deficiency and hypothyroidism. There's a number of different things that can cause memory problems that really need to be ruled out if somebody's having these problems. It should not be assumed that they have Alzheimer's.
Right.
But all of that was normal. And so the doctor at that point said, I feel he has some kind of dementia, but it's too early to call it Alzheimer's. You have to see progression or worsening of the disease before you want to put a label like that on it. And but that's what happened over the next 6 to 12 months. He did continue to get worse, and we did get a second opinion, too, from the Bird Alzheimer Institute in Tampa, part of the University of South Florida, and they agreed that he had the early onset form of the disease, which is in people who are under 65 years old. So this was really pretty devastating to us. I mean, at this point, he was about 53 years old.
Gosh.
And, we're looking at our whole future. People with Alzheimer's, the average from diagnosis to dying is about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So we, complete altering of our future life together.
Yeah, especially at such a young age.
And
like
having
that.
kids still, that are probably in the house, huh?
Right,
wow.
Yeah. Our older daughter, she was just getting married at that point. And our younger daughter was still in high school, when he was diagnosed. So it's been a long journey for all of us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So do you think there's a genetic component that's going on with the Alzheimer's?
Well, he does have, there's something called apolipoprotein E. And most people have either E2, E3, E4, and it's a combination, one gene from each parent. So you can have a combination of E2 and E3 or E3 and E3. And if you have E3 and E3, that's the most common. And you just have an average risk of dementia, if you have that. But if you happen to have E4, you're at higher risk of developing Alzheimer's ultimately. It doesn't mean you will for sure, but you have a higher risk. But if you happen to have 2 copies of that, one from each parent, then you have a very significant risk of having the early onset form of the disease.
Wow. And so what does your husband have? Does he have both from both sides?
We know that he has E4, but we're not sure if he has one from each parent or not.
Oh, okay.
He had testing once when he was entering a clinical trial, and all they would tell us is that he was E4 positive.
Okay.
And we haven't been able to find out. It's a test that I would like to have done on him, but we just haven't had it done.
Yeah.
But it's if you're E2, you have a much lower risk than the average population.
So how did you, at that point, even come into the realm of knowing about coconut oil? Had you been doing some research? Is that how you found it, or?
Well, it was really an accident, and it's because I'm a neonatologist and had used MCT oil before that I even recognized it. And basically what happened in 2008, in May, we were there were 2 new drugs that were available that were going to start clinical trials for Alzheimer's. And both of these drugs were aimed at removing the beta amyloid, the plaques that are in the brain that are characteristic of Alzheimer's. And it was believed that if you remove these plaques, that it would decrease the damage to the surrounding tissue and that the person might improve.
Okay.
It turned out it was wrong in both cases ultimately. But at that time, it was our only hope, And so he had screened for one of the trials early in May, and the MMSC test, the 30-point test, you needed at least a 16 to qualify, and he got only 12 on the test. So we were bitterly disappointed that he didn't get accepted. He met all of the other criteria for the test, except that. And the physician there said, why don't you come back in a couple weeks and try again? And if he can score at least 16, then, we'll take him into the trial. And then in the meantime, this other clinical trial became available, too, for a different drug. And so I had him screening on back-to-back days for these 2 trials. And the night before the first screening, I got on the Internet, and I thought, what if he gets accepted into both studies? Because you can't be in 2 trials at the same time. You have to pick one.
Oh, right.
So I was looking at the risks and the benefits of these 2 drugs, and I just happened upon a press release, and it was about medical food that was working towards FDA approval as a medical food. It wasn't available yet. It was still about a year away from being available on the market. But they claimed that in their clinical trial that nearly half of the people that took it had improved memory and cognition. And that's not something you even hear about any of the Alzheimer's drugs. There are about 5 of them that exist now, and they say that they slow down the progress of the disease, but they don't claim to improve memory or cognition. So but it didn't say what it was or how it worked. So I was able to find their patent application online. There's a website called Free Patents Online. You can look up any U.S. patent, all the way back to when they started doing patents. And their product was called AC1202 at that point. And as I read through their very lengthy patent application, I learned about an aspect of Alzheimer's that I was not aware of before. You hear a lot about plaques and tangles, but in this case, there's groups really all over the world have studied this. But in particular, a group at Brown University had coined Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. And basically, there's insulin deficiency and insulin resistance in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. And what this group had found, they had studied the brains of people that did not have a diagnosis of type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So they were believed to be non-diabetics, but they found insulin deficiency and insulin resistance in their brains.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then they looked at people, and they coined the term type 3 diabetes.
That's interesting. Okay.
For Alzheimer's. And then they studied another group of people who had died at various stages of Alzheimer's, And what they found was that early in the course of the disease, that this insulin resistance and insulin deficiency was in the parts of the brain affected by Alzheimer's, but that it got worse and it spread throughout the brain, such that like at the most severe stages of the disease, it was all through the brain, this problem. And so, what happens basically, glucose is the primary and preferred fuel for the brain, most of the time. And insulin is required to get glucose into the cells. So if you don't have enough insulin or the cells are resistant to insulin, glucose isn't getting in and the cells malfunction and they eventually die. And these are brain cells, that you need for memory and cognition and even motor control, everything.
Do you think this is the same kind of thing that's going on? Like, how when diabetic people need to have their fingers amputated or things, do you think this same process is happening in the extremities?
Yes, I do, because they develop organ damage over time. It affects their kidneys, their eyes. They just don't get glucose into the cells, and like the eyes are an extension of the brain. Those are really neurons in there, rods and cones and things. And the retina is very susceptible to damage, from insulin resistance. So it's the same thing. It's just that in this case, it's the brain that's affected.
Wow.
The cells of the brain.
That's really interesting. We have to take a short break, Dr. Newport.
Okay.
I apologize for that, but I want to get in afterwards. Maybe after we get back from the break, we can talk about, what's causing, because this diabetes link is interesting. I wonder if there's people are eating too much insulin, or if there's a heavy metal thing, or things like that. But we didn't even mention your website, and for that, I apologize. Your website is coconutketones.com. So check out her website. She's got some media there, and she's got some books and stuff that she has on there. Lots of really good information. coconutketones.com. Ketones.
There's no Y in it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Gotcha.
Keton. Okay. Excellent. And we'll be right back after this break with Dr. Mary Newport. It was really cool. A while back, we had Deborah Lynn Dad on our show, and that was episode number 45. She's kind of like the queen of detoxification and getting toxins and chemicals and poisons and drugs out of your body and out of your home. She has a really, really great website. And again, that was extremehealthradio.com/45, her interview that we had. And she turned us on to a really cool product. It's a natural zeolite, which is pretty amazing, actually. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, you could check it out at extremehealthradio.com/zeolite. That's ZEOLITE. That will redirect you to this really cool product that she turned us on to. And I talked with her at length about it. And I've been doing a lot of research about it. And zeolites are adsorptive, so they're positively charged. And they bind to anything that's negatively charged, which is like toxins and poisons and chemicals and all these things that we're exposed to. And what they do is they just pull them out of your bloodstream. The size of the zeolite molecule is really important too. So the smaller the size, the more powerful and the more toxins it's going to grab onto and flush out of your body. And this one I think is 0.03 microns, which is really, really small. I think it's the smallest in the industry from what I've learned and from what I've researched. So it's really, really a cool product. And if you're living in the modern world and want to get these heavy metals and toxins and poisons out of your bloodstream, check it out, extremehealthradio.com/zeolite. And it's about, I think, $24 per month for a bottle. And it's really a great way to get rid of these toxins and poisons out of your bloodstream and capillaries and out of the cells and all that kind of stuff. And we really, really liked the product and spoke with the company and trust Deborah. She's done a lot of great work. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check it out, extremehealthradio.com/zeolite, or you can read about it more on our store as well. And thanks for listening, and let's get back to the show.
100% listener supported. Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Don't forget to join our thriving community for health tips, inspiration, and show updates at extremehealthradio.com/Facebook.
All right, we're having a good time here with Dr. Mary Newport of coconutketones.com.
Without a Y.
Without a Y. With Anna K.
This is right. We'll post it on our site.
We'll post it on our site. And I wanted to let you know, too, check out that zeolite, because that's a really, really good product. We take that every single day ourselves to clear out heavy metals that we're exposed to. And from what I understand, heavy metals are involved to some degree in our neurological capacities, our brains and things. So make sure to check out that. And also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, like the lady said. And we'd love to have you join our community. And Dr. Newport, before the break, we were talking about your story with your husband. And right before, we were just discussing about the Alzheimer's being called type 3 diabetes. Right. What do you think is going on? It's really interesting to me that they wouldn't have blood sugar issues in their body, but they would have more of that going on in their brain. It's really fascinating.
It is fascinating. That has yet to be figured out. The same group that called it type 3 diabetes at Brown University has found that nitrates and nitrites in food tend to cause insulin resistance in the brain.
Oh.
They are converted to these toxic lipids in the liver, and they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they can do damage. They found this in animals, so far. So that's one thing. And, like you were saying, heavy metals. I mean, there could be any number of culprits. And, people with Alzheimer's actually have an unusual number of microorganisms in the brain, too. Oh. Like chlamydia has been found there. Herpes simplex virus compared to people who don't have dementia. People that have Alzheimer's have a lot more of these organisms in their brains when they look for them, like an autopsy.
Those are things you'd never expect to see in the brain.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And, and I worry about medications, too, because, a lot of people take over-the-counter medications, for sleep, and like Benadryl and doxylamine, things like that, and cough medicines. There are all these drugs that are anticholinergic. They actually, somebody who has Alzheimer's, they have decreased production of acetylcholine, one of the neurotransmitters, and anticholinergics also affect acetylcholine, So someone who is developing Alzheimer's and you give them something like Benadryl, it may make them even more confused and work against them. And I wonder how, these and many other medications might accumulate in the brain and maybe damage the receptors for insulin and other, neurotransmitters and things in the brain, So,
wow, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, but the brain doesn't have a great way of clearing itself out compared to other organs of the body.
I guess that makes sense because there's no way to really cleanse the brain like you can, like you just said, Right.
The spinal fluid, is kind of surrounds the brain, but it doesn't really get deeply into the brain, so to speak. And if you think like the intestinal tract, that just cleans itself out, In the lungs, we have the bronchi, you can bring stuff up, but the brain doesn't have a real great way to clean itself. So it could be that there's stuff accumulating there that the brain just can't get rid of very effectively.
Interesting. Okay, so now your husband at this point was, had he been just starting to take the MCT oil or not yet?
Well, not yet. And, I read about, this, I found this medical food that was going to come out in a year, and I was reading their patent application. So then the concept that they had come up with was using an alternative fuel to glucose for the brain cells. And it just so happens when you take medium-chain triglyceride oil that your liver converts part of it to ketones.
Okay.
And when you go into starvation, for example, if you don't eat food for a couple of days or if you run a marathon, you run out of glucose fairly quickly in your body. The glucose that's stored in your liver is used up fairly quickly, and your muscles use glucose that's stored in the muscle. And your brain, the only way you can survive after that is to switch over to burning fat, normally. And so you start breaking down fat, and your liver converts part of that to ketones, and they cross the blood-brain barrier, and your brain cells use ketones as an alternative fuel, and the brain switches very easily back and forth between using glucose and ketones. So, their concept was to use medium-chain triglyceride oil to produce ketones in the body, and these will cross into the brain and provide fuel to the brain, to these cells that are not getting glucose in effectively. So it kind of bypasses the problem, so to speak.
Interesting. So is there a difference between MCT oil and regular coconut oil? Is MCT oil more concentrated or?
Yeah. In coconut oil, about 60% of the fat in coconut oil are medium-chain triglycerides.
Okay.
And they, like when they're making MCT oil, they extract those medium chains from the coconut oil, and it's more concentrated. It doesn't have as much of the lauric acid. Lauric acid is about half of coconut oil, and it is a medium-chain triglyceride. And it's one of the things that has a lot of antimicrobial properties. You know, it kills viruses, bacteria, protozoa, that kind of thing, fungus.
Okay.
And so when they extract it from coconut oil, there's usually still a small amount of lauric acid, but there's another one, tricaprilic acid or caprylic acid, is one of the medium chains that makes up most of the MCT oil. And there's even some MCT oil out there that's pure caprylic acid.
Interesting.
And so this medical food, they were using the caprylic acid, which is very ketogenic, which means it produces a lot of ketones, you know, when you consume it, test.
And what are ketones exactly? Sorry to interrupt, but what are ketones? Yeah.
They're very small molecules that, you know, when you burn fat in your body, you know, basically it breaks down into smaller particles. And these are very tiny particles. They're not really much different in size or maybe slightly different than glucose, and they're just taken very easily into the mitochondria in the brain. Mitochondria are the cells they're little organelles that are inside of all of our cells that produce the energy that our cells work off of. ATP is the energy. So like most cells have anywhere from maybe 100 to 1,000 mitochondria that produce the energy that the cell operates off of.
Oh, wow.
And so glucose and ketones are very small molecules that could be taken up and used to create this ATP energy that we operate our cells with.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so it's, you know, their concept was to, you know, bypass that problem of insulin resistance by providing ketones, since the cells could not effectively use glucose. And they did 2 studies, and the first study was just a single dose of MCT oil, and they had people come on 2 different days, so they got placebo one time and got MCT oil the other time. And they didn't know, people were blinded, they didn't know who got what, you know, on what day. And they did 7 different tests, and it was something like, I think 5 out of the 7 tests that almost half of the people that got the MCT oil had improved scores, you know, significantly improved scores on these tests after just a single dose of MCT oil. So effectively, it works as immediate energy, you know, for these cells in the brain that aren't functioning well.
How are they administering the MCT oil?
How do they administer it? It's liquid, and they put it into whipping cream.
Oh, really?
So the placebo, they either got whipping cream or they got the whipping cream with the MCT oil mixed into it.
How funny.
And so it disguised it. And, but they probably had diarrhea after the MCT oil. So the people that got it probably knew which day they got it. When you take that as much MCT oil as they got, you know.
Yeah.
And you've never taken it before, that can happen.
Okay, gotcha.
But the interesting thing, too, is whipping cream actually has a little bit of medium-chain triglycerides in it. So it might have been better if they used something else that didn't have any medium-chain triglycerides, like maybe mix it with olive oil or something like that.
Yeah, a little overload.
But it doesn't have any medium chains.
Oh, wow.
And so these people had some good results in that study.
That's a great study.
Yeah, they did. And then they did a longer study of 152 people that lasted for several months. It was a 3-month study, and then some of the people continued on for 6 months. And they found once again that nearly half of the people improved after when they were the group that was consuming the medium chain triglyceride oil. They improved, and it was mostly the people who were not ApoE4 plus that improved. But they did have individuals that improved who were ApoE4. So there's a misconception that's come out of their trial that it's not even worth trying for people who are ApoE4, but it is worth trying because certain individuals did, and my husband is one of them who was ApoE4 that did respond. And so anyway, what happened with Steve was, you know, I was reading his patent application. It was about 1 a.m., and his testing for the first clinical trial was at 9 a.m., so I didn't have time to run out and buy coconut oil. I learned in the patent application that MCT oil came from coconut oil. And so we went for the screening, and this time he scored only 14 out of 30, and he needed 16 to get in. So on the way home, I thought, what do we have to lose? I'm going to pick up some coconut oil. So we drove about an hour out of the way, and then I found out later that, there's little health food stores all over Spring Hill that already had coconut oil. But we brought that home. And another thing, too, like you can see him on my website, that day the doctor asked him to draw a clock, which there's a clock test for Alzheimer's, and all he drew, instead of a big circle with numbers around it, like a clock, he drew several small circles and 4 numbers. And they were just kind of random on the page. It looked really bizarre, nothing like a clock. And the doctor told me that he was on the verge of severe Alzheimer's,
Oh, wow.
I knew he was getting bad, but I didn't realize, until you just see, what he's thinking looks as a clock, it was pretty striking. And so, I was really in this what do you have to lose mode, of thinking. And so the next morning, after I had researched, coconut oil and, what percent was medium chain triglycerides, and, based on the dose that they used in their clinical trials, which was 20 grams of MCT oil, that equated to a little over 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. So I put that into I put it in some oatmeal because coconut oil tends to be a little solid at room temperature, and it melts down very quickly on something warm. And we've gotten a little away from the carbs, now, but at that point we put it on coconut oil, and he ate it, and his testing was about 4 hours later. And when we were on our way down, I was trying to help him remember what day of the week was and the season, that it was spring. He couldn't even come up with the word spring,
Oh, gosh.
And I thought, he's not going to do any better. But then we got down there, and they took him away for the test, and he came back, and this nurse comes in, and she starts drawing his blood and talking about, and I said, well, how did he do? She says, he scored an 18. So he had gained like 4 points from the day before.
Oh, my God.
And he remembered suddenly, it just kicked in, that it was spring, that it was Wednesday, what floor he was on, where we were. I mean, things he couldn't remember at all the previous time,
Wow.
He just suddenly remembered. So he qualified for the clinical trial. And, at that point, I didn't know if it was the coconut oil or just really good luck.
Yeah.
So, but I decided I'm going to keep the coconut oil going, and I started giving him, in the beginning, a measured dose every morning for breakfast, just over 2 tablespoons, and then just started cooking with it. I got every recipe I could think of, cookbooks and things like that, and started cooking with it the rest of the day, and eventually we ended up adding, so that he was getting it with each meal, and then a little before bedtime. And, then I started actually adding MCT oil to the coconut oil. I started talking with Dr. Richard Veech. It's Veech. He's at the NIH in Rockville, Maryland. And he had developed a ketone ester. He's considered one of the world's experts on ketones. And the ketone ester can raise ketone levels much, much higher than you can get with coconut oil. But it's still working towards FDA approval, still needs clinical trials on Alzheimer's, which are actually a pilot study is about to happen very soon.
Isn't he doing some testing with the beta-hydroxybutyrate? And
yes,
all that kind of stuff?
That's one of the ketones, yes. And the ester that he has is a beta-hydroxybutyrate ester.
Okay. And
that's one of the ketones. And he's had he has done toxicity testing in humans now, and that passed scrutiny, no adverse effects. So it's been approved as a food for use in healthy adults for 5 days.
Is it possible to get that particular product?
At the moment, it's not, but it's getting close. He's been working with companies to try to mass produce it, and he needs funding to get it mass produced. Basically, he's just trying to sort out which company is going to get the product at this point, and it may come out as an energy drink at first.
Oh, wow. So could we keep up to date with your website to find out more information on that? Or
Yes, definitely. When that becomes available, it will be posted on my website. And one of his most recent studies is, there's several of his references that you can print out from my website, but there's one, his most recent article is available that you can just click on and print it out from my website. It's in like mice that are Alzheimer's models. So now the next step is to test it in people, and there is a study that is expected to start in the UK with Alzheimer's patients with this ketone ester. He has a partner who has developed this product with him over the years, and Dr. Kieran Clark, and she's going to be conducting a study there in Oxford of people with Alzheimer's. It's a 5-day study. It'll show whether there's symptomatic improvement or not. We expect that there will be improvement. The reason, it's like, why not here in the U.S.? Well, to get an investigational new drug trial going, it costs, you have to pay the FDA $10 million.
Oh.
And that doesn't count the cost of the materials, the ketone ester, and the testing of the people in the trial.
Yeah.
So it's extremely expensive, and they don't have that cost in England. So that's why the pilot study is going to happen there. And, if the results are positive, then it's much more likely that the NIH will help fund that, that cost for the FDA. And, so hopefully, that will, I don't think the study will take a long time, so I'm hoping within the next 6 months to a year that, they may be able to get this out, at least as an energy drink.
Wow. Well, we'll keep up to date with that and keep our fingers crossed. And we're with Dr. Mary Newport, and keep up to date with her website, coconutketones.com. And we'll have a link on this show page too for that, and be checking on there because there's going to be all kinds of really good studies and things happening. So make sure to check that out. And we're going to run a little ad right now for the sauna that we love. And our dentist, actually, Dr. Stuart Nunley out in Texas, I think he was diagnosed with not Alzheimer's, but ALS. And he was able to reverse his condition by sweating in far-infrared saunas and taking high-dose vitamin C. So there could be some connection here with sweating out toxins and these neurological disorders like that. So make sure to check out that. And when we come back with Dr. Newport, I want to ask her about some things people that we know about have tried coconut oil with no success. And I'm just curious if there's differences with perhaps some of them may be cooked or hydrogenated oils, or I've heard that there's MCT oil coming from corn these days. Yeah. And I'm just curious if there's particular types of oils and things that we need to be looking at. So we'll talk about that with Dr. Mary Newport when we come back, and we'll be right back after this break. So there's no real way to avoid toxins or chemicals in our daily life. It seems like we're exposed to them no matter what we do in our lives, from paint fumes to mercury fillings, coal-fired plants, perfumes, soaps, off-gassing of carpets in our houses, and genetically modified foods, and foods that are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, the xenoestrogens in plastics and car exhaust, secondhand smoke, even your dry cleaning and laundry detergents, even your mattresses have chemicals inside them that outgas. So getting these toxins and chemicals and poisons out of your bloodstream and out of your fat cells is going to be really critical moving forward in our society, because it seems like every year there's more and more chemicals that keep becoming introduced with new products in the market. So I would consider getting one of these far infrared saunas. We've got a great sauna developed by Phil Wilson, and I've known about his work for many years, and I'm so proud to be offering his sauna on our website. And he's been in this business since 1975. And this sauna is really great because it slows the aging process. It helps with weight loss and burning calories. I think you can burn like 600 calories in 15 or 20 minutes, and it helps to cleanse the skin. It improves your sleep and helps to prevent illnesses like flus and colds, as well as energizing the body. And it's great for improving blood circulation and promoting cellular renewal, as well as increasing metabolism and inducing profuse sweating. And it's really great. And the great thing is too, is you don't produce any lactic acid. So you can sweat without producing any of this lactic acid that you would normally produce if you lifted weights or went for a big long run. So if you're interested in this, you can check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna. It's great because it sets up in about 2 to 5 minutes, and it's portable, and it's super easy to clean. It's got low electromagnetic field radiation coming off of it. and it produces energy and heat inside the sauna evenly. It's great machine. So if you're interested in sweating like this for only 15 minutes a day, it's great. It requires zero preheating. It's got a 1-year warranty, and Phil Wilson is a great guy. We're so proud to be offering his saunas on our website. So if you're interested, check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna, or you could check it out in our store, and it's $990 plus $25 shipping. And that's really a good deal because many of the saunas out there, you can check them out. They're in the thousands of dollars, $2,000 to $4,000. So this is great. You can buy it through PayPal. You don't even need a PayPal account. It's 100% secure. So consider doing this if you're interested in living a long, healthy, disease-free life. So check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna.
Free. All free shows, all the time on Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Join our community today. Sign up to our email list and instantly get our free gift to you, along with loads of inspirational content and cutting-edge tips to help change your life at extremehealthradio.com/subscribe.
All right, we're having a good time with Dr. Mary Newport, diving into the world of oil. Coconut oil and MCT oil, and I hope you're enjoying the show so far. And like I said before the break, don't forget to check out something like that sauna, because there are some really interesting things going on with sweating out a lot of these heavy metals and toxins from your nervous system. And I have a inclination that there's an issue with that and not being able to sweat these toxins out. So check out the sauna, and also don't forget to subscribe to our email list if you have not done so. If you're looking for a really great primer on natural healing, natural cures, liver health, detoxification, colon health, and those types of things, we give away a free ebook, Lessons from the Miracle Doctor. So don't forget to subscribe to our email list. And Dr. Newport, before the break, I want to get back to your husband and his progress here, but I also was curious about some of the reasons why coconut oil may not have worked for people. I'm just trying to brainstorm here, and I'm thinking perhaps people have been exposed to lots of heavy metals, or they're not taking the right kind of coconut oil or MCT oil, or maybe their medication's blocking this interaction. What do you think's going on with people who have tried it and have not had success?
Yeah. There could be several different reasons. One is if they don't truly have Alzheimer's or don't have insulin resistance in the brain. And a lot of people are misdiagnosed. I think it's estimated 30 or 40% of them are misdiagnosed. That could be one thing. Another is that they might also lack the enzymes that they need to convert MCT oil to ketones, or to use them effectively. So there could be, all of these chemical reactions require enzymes, and it could be that in those people they just don't have enough of the right enzymes to use the ketones effectively.
Could they take possibly, what are those lipase and digestive enzymes, do you think? Or would that be?
It probably wouldn't help with ketones. Because like the medium-chain triglycerides don't even need those to be absorbed through the intestine.
Oh, that's right.
They're just absorbed directly, and they go straight to the liver by way of the portal vein. Okay. And it's in the liver is where they're metabolized to ketones, and even in the brain a little bit. The medium chains themselves are used as fuel in mitochondria, and the astrocytes in the brain, they're like cells that help support the neurons. They provide nutrition to the neurons. That ketones are even made in the astrocytes from medium-chain triglycerides.
Interesting.
So, but if you're lacking enzymes, you might not do that very efficiently either.
Okay. What are some other?
That could be a problem for some people.
Yeah. What are some other things that you can think of that? Because I thought perhaps just about everybody these days is on some form of medication. I don't know. We can't tell people not to take their medication, but just trying to brainstorm some ideas here.
Yeah, I do think like Steve, he improved a lot over the first year, quite very significantly, and then he was stable for another year, and the first major setback he had was related to a medication.
Oh.
He had a flare-up of gout, and his doctor prescribed prednisone for him, a steroid. And it was like he fell off a cliff. 3 or 4 days, he got so much worse just over like 3 or 4 days of taking this. And somehow it interfered, I think, with the ketone production, in his brain, and or the use of glucose, in his brain. Somehow it interfered with that. And it took him about 6 weeks to recover from that.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he just developed this high anxiety and pacing and paranoia. It's just a completely different person,
Wow.
And
is there an issue with like a hydrogenated or cooked coconut oil versus the raw kind, or?
Yeah, hydrogenated oils, any kind of hydrogenated oil, including coconut oil, should be avoided.
Okay.
The trans fats, they're very stiff. They're not normal fatty acids that we would have in our bodies, that our bodies know what to do with. And they basically get deposited in cell membranes, and they're very stiff. They're straight compared to the nice curve that most fatty acids have. And they literally decrease the fluidity of the cell membrane and decrease the lifespan of the cell.
Wow.
And they interfere, the cell membrane decides what gets across in both directions, coming in and going out. And if you start plugging it up with these trans fats, it can greatly interfere with those processes. And so, the trans fats themselves may have something to do with causing Alzheimer's too.
Oh, wow. So you don't want to just go out and pick up any coconut oil then?
Right. You want to look for, to make sure it, you can look at the label and see if it has trans fats or not.
Okay.
That's required to be on the label. And if it's hydrogenated, it has to say that. And you see an awful lot of processed foods. If you look through the ingredients, you'll see partially hydrogenated oil. It could be any kind of oil, coconut oil, soybean oil. They do that to prolong the shelf life. But it's really a good thing to completely avoid. If you see hydrogenated, or partially hydrogenated in the list of ingredients, put it back.
Yeah. Well, we had just heard, I think last week even, that is it true that maybe some MCT oil is coming from a corn product instead of a coconut?
That I don't know about.
Okay.
I suppose anything's possible, but corn oil doesn't have any medium chains in it. So basically they would have to break it down and resynthesize it, so
Okay.
it would be not a natural oil,
Sure.
And sometimes when they do those processes, it reverses the shape of the fatty acid. They call them racemic, molecules, where they're like the opposite, like mirror images. So they probably would not work as well either,
Sure.
They wouldn't be recognized and dealt with normally in the body. So, I'd be leery of it if it's made from corn oil, you know.
And Dr. Newport,
So-
what do you think about some of the foods that people should avoid? Because we're trying to figure out, what could be blocking coconut oil or MCT oil from working on people. What food do you think they should avoid? You were just talking about hydrogenated oils, and so I'm thinking if people are going to be taking an MCT oil and trying to get the ketones in that way, but then they're also shooting themselves in the foot by eating processed food or specific foods, could be hindering. What foods do you think people should avoid?
Yeah. Well, again, the nitrates and nitrites, you're working against yourself if you're consuming those. And those are, they're in most deli meats, bacon, but you can find bacons that do not have nitrites. They're just not easy to find, but there are products out there. And the same thing like with deli meats. Most of them have nitrites in it.
Okay.
And, a lot of the preservatives used on meats out in the, especially beef, have nitrites in them to help keep the color in there, and help preserve them and that kind of thing. Some processed cheeses have it. All white flour has thiamine mononitrate in it. It's a nitrate, and that's cookies, crackers, bread, white breads. So any kind of white flour, would be a good thing to avoid. This vitamin that's in it, it's required by the government to fortify it. They've been doing that since 1941. If you try to look that up on the FDA website, it's very minimal, like several month-long studies in animals and a few people that they base the safety of it on. But I worry a lot about that because it's a partly fat-soluble vitamin. Thiamine's usually water-soluble. So your body would take what it needs and you'd excrete the rest. But this mononitrate form is a synthetic form of the vitamin, and it can be deposited in fat. So if you're eating a lot of white flour, for example, you can accumulate this stuff over time. And I do worry, but I have no proof, I haven't seen studies yet, to prove that one way or the other. But Dr. Suzanne Delamonte, she's the one that studies the nitrates and nitrites at Brown University. She agrees that white flour should be avoided for that reason.
Okay.
It's also in some beers, but the beers don't have to disclose on their label whether they have this in it or not. They use nitrates in their process. And tobacco is very heavy on
tobacco.
Nitrates. Yeah. So smoking is not a good thing if you want to avoid having dementia and a lot of other illnesses over time.
Are there any
and
other
then
foods?
Excessive sugar, too. I mean, just, it boggles my mind that the American Diabetic Association recommends that diabetics be on a relatively high carbohydrate diet and a low-fat diet, and it really should be the reverse. If you think about it, the more sugar you eat, the more insulin your body needs to produce to take care of it, and it just kind of perpetuates the problem. And if you eat a low carbohydrate diet, you don't need the insulin to deal with the carbohydrate. You don't need as much of it, and the way you replace a carbohydrate is basically to eat more fat or more protein, and there's a limit to how much protein your body can use effectively, and it will start converting some of your protein to glucose. But fat, is probably the best way to, having a little bit higher fat diet and a low carb diet to avoid some of these problems, too, with insulin resistance.
It's interesting. We had Magda Havas on a while back, and she's really an expert in the EMF and cell phones and radiation and things, and she was talking about how these cell phones, especially the smartphones, I think they break down the blood-brain barrier, especially in kids, but also in adults. And these toxins that we get exposed to that typically stay in our bloodstream, because that blood-brain barrier has now been compromised from the radiation of the cell phone, these toxins can now go up to the brain. And I wonder if there's a connection with, I guess, weakening our barrier there, and allowing these toxins that we're getting from food or from exhaust fumes or anywhere else to get into the brain. I wonder if there's a connection between cell phones and, Alzheimer's and dementia and these types of things.
Yeah. Well, in Alzheimer's, there is a problem with the blood-brain barrier allowing too much through, and there tends to be inflammation in the brain, too, and that kind of helps break down the blood-brain barrier. And, where's the inflammation coming from? And heavy metals could very well be part of it. Too much omega-6 fatty acids tend to increase inflammation, too. Oh. And omega-6, you need some of it, but not very much.
Okay.
But most of the oils, like soybean oil, canola oil, are high in omega-6, and they have a minuscule amount of omega-3. You just need a little omega-3, unless you get a huge amount of omega-6, and somehow you have to balance out the two.
Okay.
They should be like 1-to-1 ratio, ideally, But if you eat a lot of soybean oil or canola oil, they're very high in omega-6, and you might eat a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And omega-3 is anti-inflammatory, and omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. That means, hormones that cause inflammation. Your body needs a certain amount of that to fight infection and that kind of thing. But when it becomes excessive, then you develop inflammation in the inside of your arteries and other cells like in the brain and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you really want to support your body. It's not just that the MCT oil is like this cure-all panacea. You really want to support your body from every single angle, don't you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You want to avoid excessive sugar, avoid hydrogenated fats, avoid foods that have these nitrites in it. And even recently, they were talking about many multivitamins perhaps have too much metal in them.
Wow.
You have copper and zinc and things like that. You need a certain amount of it, but it's very possible to get too much of it, and that these will accumulate in your brain as well. Yeah. So you have to even be careful. It's better to get these things from food, actually.
Yeah, it seems a lot more natural, that's for sure.
So how is your husband doing these days? Has he had a pretty steady improvement over time?
Well, he improved a whole lot the first year, and then he was stable for another year, and he's had setbacks since then, so he's not quite where he was 5 years ago, and it has been 5 years.
Yeah.
Physically, he's in really good shape. He's up and around most of the day. Cognitively, he's down from where he was, right after this happened, during that first year. But every setback, he'll have long, stable periods. Every setback he's had has been related to a medication.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's just very sensitive. And there's one type of dementia called Lewy body dementia, and these people are exquisitely sensitive to medications. And if there is an adverse effect that affects 1% of the population, they will have it. It seems to be that way. So I sometimes wonder if there's like some overlap between these various dementias, if maybe he has some of that going on. But I have several people now, 5 of them that have kept in contact with me, 4 of them with Alzheimer's that are now 3 to 4 years into using this. And they had initial improvement, and then they've been stable. They have not gotten worse over that time, which is amazing. And then there's a man with ALS that he's been taking 9 tablespoons a day for almost 4 years now of coconut oil. And he said it took 4 to 6 months for improvement to be obvious to him, and then he stabilized, and he has not gotten worse over now almost 4 years.
Wow.
And that's unheard of. ALS is a disease that's progressive, and they usually die within 3 to 5 years.
Well, people are using this on epilepsy, dementia, schizophrenia, right? Muscular dystrophy and all that.
Parkinson's. I've had more than 20 people now with Parkinson's that have reported improvement to me. And the thing is consistency, taking it every day, basically taking as much as you can tolerate, and then reducing other fats and carbohydrate in the diet to compensate for the calories so you don't gain too much weight.
Okay.
But, the people with Parkinson's, have, I've had a number of them now, over 20, that have reported improvement.
Is there any upper limit to how much you can take? Do you think?
I know people who take as much as 9 to 11 tablespoons a day. Like Steve, he gets about 9 or 10 on average of this mixture of MCT and coconut oil that we do. And then he likes coconut milk, and we cook with coconut oil, so he gets at least that much every day. And you would think he would be really heavy, but he actually weighs about 15 pounds less than when we started using coconut oil.
Because it really does, people get afraid that it's going to put on weight and raise their cholesterol, but it really does the opposite, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does the opposite. If it raises cholesterol, it usually raises HDL cholesterol, good cholesterol. Mm-hmm. And what we saw with Steve is that, and me, that our HDL cholesterol went up quite a bit early on. His HDL cholesterol was in the 30s before he started this, and it got up as high as 105.
Wow.
And it stabilized around 80, and that's considered the good cholesterol. And then his LDL cholesterol just slowly started coming down, and it was in the 150, 160 range, and now it's 89 or 90. So, his total cholesterol is 168, and that's after 5 years of a huge amount of coconut oil.
Dr. Newport, what do you suggest as far as people taking it on a daily basis that don't have issues as a preventative? Do you suggest just taking a tablespoon a day?
Like 3 to 5 tablespoons a day.
Okay.
And just substitute it for the other fats in the diet. It's it's really good to cook with, and it's, you don't want to overheat it up to 350. Okay. It's okay, and it starts smoking above that. So it doesn't really change unless you get to that smoke point. And MCT oil is not real great for cooking. It smokes at a lower temperature, but that's really helpful. It's useful. It's liquid at room temperature, so it's really good as a salad dressing or to put in smoothies and things like that.
Okay, I love that. So now your book, Alzheimer's Disease, What If There Was a Cure? The Story of Ketones is available on Amazon and your website. And what other books would you point people to as a reference? I know you got some links on your website. Can you think of any off the hand people can go check out? Obviously your book. Yeah.
There's one book that I read fairly recently that I found very helpful was The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. It's Jeff Volek and Finney. And these are two guys that have been researching low-carbohydrate diets for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Human subjects, every variation that you can think of, men and women, and all different diets, and the metabolic effects of low-carbohydrate diet and effects on cholesterol. I mean, and they explain why it's beneficial and what levels. They recommend that most people should keep under 75 grams of carbohydrate a day, and they've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people with type 2 diabetes go completely into remission.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so they get off their insulin, they get off the other drugs, and they can get down to normal blood sugars if they follow a low-carbohydrate diet.
Wow.
And, there's so many diabetic people out there, and pre-diabetic people. It's probably half of people, when you get into your 70s or so, you're at least pre-diabetic, if not but diabetic. And you might be able to avoid that if you can, get away from the typical American diet and go to a relatively low-carbohydrate diet.
That's interesting. Yeah, we've heard of that, people using the ketogenic diet, which I think is that for cancer and everything else. I mean, it just seems like it's such a really good thing. So where's your work going? What kinds of things are you working on as we're going to close out the show here? Are you working on anything new? Yeah,
I'm actually working on a shorter version, more condensed version of my book. It's very heavy on the science about ketones. It's 400-plus pages, and so now I'm working on a 100-pager to keep it simple and more practical, for people that want to do this. So hopefully that will come out by January or so, if not sooner. And then I'm getting more involved at University of South Florida in Tampa. The Bird Alzheimer Institute is actually beginning a study of coconut oil and Alzheimer's. So I'm very, very happy about that. That was one of my goals of my book, was to get clinical trials done. They haven't been done yet. But without awareness of the idea, how would they get done? But anyway, so the Bird Center is starting this. And then also at University of South Florida, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino has been working with Dr. Tom Seyfried of Boston College on cancer and ketogenic diet. And his work is extremely interesting, and they're hoping to get human clinical trials. I think there's one that's going to start at Pittsburgh soon. And it's an adjunct to, you don't have to choose diet versus, chemo and radiation and surgery. It's an adjunct to it. What happens with this scenario is cancer cells feed off of glucose. So if you have a high carbohydrate diet, you're feeding cancer cells basically, and they cannot use ketones. So you can starve the cancer cells by going on a very strict ketogenic diet, very high fat, very low carbohydrate, just enough protein to maintain your muscle mass. And your other cells will switch over to using ketones, but the cancer cells can't use ketones. And your blood sugar gets very low, and there's not glucose hanging around for these cancer cells to thrive on, so they start shrinking. And the metastases, they can die off with this, and the tumor itself can shrink tremendously over a period of several weeks even.
Wow, yeah, we've heard some great things about that.
Yeah, and so they're studying, also looking at adding things like the ketone ester and adding hyperbaric oxygen. They're trying all these different variations of ways, to further shrink or kill the tumor cells, and they're getting very, very good success. They're going to have some papers coming out very soon that'll be published about this, and they are hoping to get human clinical trials. And they have children, for example, that have these very aggressive brain tumors that may respond to this, and I hope to get involved with some of that, with some of the clinical trials with children, and there's potential uses in newborns too. Babies are occasionally born asphyxiated. They have a lack of oxygen for a period of time before they can get them out, and the brain uses glucose up very quickly in that situation. The same like with traumatic brain injury, severe head injuries. The brain uses glucose up very quickly, and these molecules that transport glucose into the cells are used up, and they're not available again until they regenerate for 2 or 3 days. So a lot of brain damage comes from that.
That
but
makes
the
sense.
ability to use ketones is there, still there. And if you could provide ketones to the brain, you may, be able to alleviate quite a bit of the brain damage that would happen. So that's the kind of thing that I hope, to get involved in and push, to get clinical trials done, as soon as possible, really.
Yeah, we need more of that. It's interesting. We have to keep, get the word out, but you don't want to get it out too much because you don't want to get shut down. But
right.
it's interesting, a little balance there. But I want to thank you, Mary, for being on the show, Dr.
You're
Newport.
welcome.
And,
Yes,
sharing your
thank
story
you.
and giving people hope. I love it.
Thank you. And thank you for helping me to spread the message.
Oh,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much. And we'll be in contact soon. I'll send you an email and we'll be in contact soon with the show.
Great.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Doctor.
you. You
Thank
too.
you for having me on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
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 So, Dr. Newport, what do you think? That was a really great show, wasn't it?
She's great.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Think about all those babies that are so grateful for all she's done over the past 30 years, that alone.
Yeah.
And then all the, obviously, research and things she's done with her book with the MCT oil, and just the information she's putting out there is invaluable for people. So
Yeah, and to be knowledgeable about what's going on with that ketone ester developed by that Dr. Theodore Van Italy, I think his name is.
right.
The ketone ester is supposed to be...
Maybe Dr. Richard Veach, too.
Oh, Veach, that's right. He's the one that's doing the studies on that, but I think it's like 100 times more concentrated than the MCT oil, which would be really great if that product could come out. But I just worry about our FDA and,
Yeah.
if they find out this stuff can have really good effects, I just worry about that,
I know. I hear you.
But anyway, I hope that you guys got a lot of good information out of this show. Don't forget to check out her book, which is Alzheimer's Disease, What If There Was a Cure? The Story of Ketones. There'll be a link to her book posted on extremehealthradio.com/138. And don't forget to check out her website as well. There'll be a link there, coconutketones.com. And if you have any questions or comments about this show, please comment on that show page too and let us know if you've had success or failure with things or perhaps why some things may or may not have worked for you. We'd love to build a resource with you guys. And now I'm looking at Maggie. She is on your lap being pet.
She's being cuddled. Her head's back and her eyes are closed.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
You wouldn't even know she was there the whole time.
That's right. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I just want to let you know, check out the zeolite too, and check out the sauna because those are really, really powerful things that you can do to chelate out some of these heavy metals if you've been exposed to them, which we all have in our life. So check those out because I think they would really, really be, just part of an overall protocol for getting rid of these heavy metals and from the brain and things.
For ideal health, that's for sure.
Yeah, for ideal health. So I think that's about it. It's time for us to go, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode.
It's time to go for now, but our mission does not end with this show.
Justin and Kate will be back with another interview packed full of ideas, discoveries, and unique ways to regain your health.
Head on over to extremehealthradio.com/subscribe and instantly download our free gift too that contains cutting-edge strategies to start making healthy lifestyle changes today.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even as you educate yourself in the field of live food nutrition and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers or listeners medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog and during this podcast is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any of the information on this podcast or in this blog, or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment or cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be construed as such. Always work with a qualified health practitioner